From a cashier working behind the counter at a local supermarket all the way up to the mafia's highest ranking, it's safe to say that anyone can be involved in money laundering in some form or another. Who knows, maybe even you have helped someone or assisted someone launder money unintentionally before. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Reese, and in today's video I'm discussing the topic of money laundering. By definition, money laundering is the process of making money earned from criminal or illegal activity to appear to have a legitimate source. Some examples of the illegal activity that this would include would be things like selling drugs and then laundering the money, or embezzlement, which is theft and then laundering the money. And the concept behind how it's portrayed is that the money that is made illegally is classified as dirty money, and the way of making it clean is to launder it. There is generally 3 steps involved in the process of money laundering, from making it dirty to clean, and that is placement, layering, and then integration. Starting with placement is where someone would take the dirty money and put it into the financial system so it's now in circulation. The layering component is where they hide the source of that money through a series of bookkeeping tricks and transactions. And now finally, integration, where the money that was dirty is now clean, so they call it washing it. And what this means is they can now withdraw that money from that financial institution, that bank account. They can use that cash, whatever the form of money that they've laundered is, they can now use that money because it's now in the system, it looks legit, and the criminals who have laundered it can now do what they want with it. Generally, money launderers will spend that money on goods and services and items which aren't really traceable or not sizable enough for it to really matter. They will buy things like jewelry, artwork, boats, precious gemstones, just off the top of my head, where they can either A, keep them forever and no one will ever raise any suspicion about them owning those items, and it's not costing them any of their actual taxpayer dollars to purchase, or B, this is where they're useful in the placement component because buying these items allow them to circulate that money into the legitimate system and remove it from their possession, where then down the line they could essentially pawn it off for a maybe even a loss, but still obtain that money legitimately and have it in the legitimate system without anyone ever being able to prove that it was illegally obtained. There are both simple and complex methods that you can undertake to launder money into society. Now, to be very clear, I want to just get 3 things off my chest. I do not condone your efforts or endeavors to launder money into society whatsoever. I do not support it at all. Number 2, it is illegal. And number 3, it is illegal. So with that disclaimer out of the way, one of the most common ways money is laundered into society is through cash-based businesses. So for example, if the organization has something like a restaurant or a car wash, they are great examples, think Breaking Bad, how they can launder that money is by inflating their daily cash flow. So let's say they served 100 people at the restaurant, and instead of serving 100 people, they said that they served 200, and they put their own money into the till, that illegal money, that's the placement component, where it would eventually make its way into their bank account. They would need to pay tax as per the normal tax rate of the country, which to them would be fine because that money's illegal. They can't use it anyway, but if they can bring it into the legitimate legal system, they're winning. And ultimately, the outcome will be the integration component where they can then use that money. It will be untraceable as to whether or not it was illegally obtained. And from there, they have successfully laundered their money. It all comes at a risk, but it is one of the most effective ways that people have laundered money for years. These types of businesses are known as fronts. And if, again, I use the references from Breaking Bad, I think in that TV show there was the laundromat, which is where they cooked underneath, but it was also a place that they could launder money because they would do jobs and say they did more than they may have actually done. And then again, I know Hal in the show bought a car wash again to launder all that money that he had made from selling meth. Now, money laundering from a digital perspective has become a lot easier as well. With millions of transfers being made 24 hours a day, it can be hard to keep track of how money moves in a digital space. Money can also be laundered through online sales and gambling, where money is transferred and converted into gaming currency and then transferred back into legitimate currency, making it look like you've made a withdrawal from a legitimate establishment from winnings, as an example. And finally, one of the newest ways that money laundering is taking place in the digital space is through cryptocurrency. Now, I don't know if you've heard of this cryptocurrency called Bitcoin, but it's super popular and I'm thinking about putting all my life savings in it. No, I'm just joking. I'm not really thinking about doing that, but everyone's heard of Bitcoin. Cryptocurrency, you've heard the term before. It is a very popular method for people to launder money at the moment because it's not fully understood and a lot of people can easily make transactions and it can just get out of hand very quickly as money passes through many different people very quickly and becomes untraceable for the most part. Now, there is a fantastic story which will put this into perspective for you, and it's about the Silk Road. There is a podcast that I listened to a long time ago, and I've actually dug it up and linked it in the description below. It's a 3-parter. It's by an organization called Casefile. They are fantastic. The podcast is about the Silk Road. It's a 3-parter. It's about how one man basically set up a website to sell things like drugs and firearms and illegal objects and assets, and he used Bitcoin as the trading currency for it. Now, I'm not going to spoil anything. I want you to leave a comment in the description below if you're actually planning to go and listen to it and tell me how much you think he had, how many Bitcoins he had when he eventually and inadvertently got caught. Have a guess, have a listen, come back and tell me if you were right. But definitely recommend listening to that. Links in the description below. Not associated with them whatsoever. I just really enjoyed the podcast, and for this particular topic, it will really put it into perspective how someone could go about laundering money through cryptocurrency. Now, a word of warning and something to definitely note is that banks are required by law to report any suspicious behavior, whether it be to do with your transactions or your depositing amounts. And in Australia, just as an example, any cash deposit that exceeds $10,000 needs to be reported. And I'm saying this just as a heat of warning that banks are always watching, and definitely be careful. Regardless of if everything's legit or not, you could be getting a knock on the door or some questions depending on the size of your transactions and what you're using your money for. Now, if you've got nothing to hide, all good. You should be fine as long as you can receipt it and make sure that you have evidence to prove what you were doing with that money and where it came from. Word of warning, it probably won't apply to anyone who watches this video, but nonetheless, thought I'd put it in here. So to summarize, money laundering is the illegal process of making dirty money look clean. Criminals use a wide variety of money laundering techniques to make their dirty money get washed and become part of society so they can use it freely. Online banking and cryptocurrencies have essentially made this activity easier for criminals as well. I like to cover abstract topics like this from time to time. Even though they may not be directly associated with personal finance, they are still money related. They're interesting to learn about and they're interesting to talk about. Overall, I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, please consider liking and subscribing. And as always, I will see you in the next one.